You're listening to episode number 37 of the She Who Dares podcast.
Welcome to the She Who Dares podcast. I'm your host, Brandee Gaar. I'm a small business entrepreneur with almost 20 years of experience in the event industry, and I've spent the last decade creating multiple thriving businesses, growing a dedicated team, and teaching others to do the same. I remember being the newbie, the fear of failure, the anxiety of not knowing the next steps, and the uncertainty of finances. I'm passionate about sharing insider tips, strategy, advice, and real-life startup stories to help others know that we all had a starting point and you're not alone. Each week, I'll share an inspiring conversation or message to encourage you to follow your dreams to start or scale your business. Thanks for hanging out with me this week. Let's jump into the episode.
Have you ever wondered, can money buy me happiness? I mean, at some point in our lives, each of us has probably asked this question, right? Maybe you're thinking, if I made six figures, life would be so much easier, right? Or if I had more money, I would be so much happier. But as somebody who grew up with very little money or very little discretionary income, I should say, and I had an awesome childhood. I loved my childhood. I would relive it now if I was given the opportunity, honestly. I don't believe that money can buy you happiness. But here's the trick. I do believe that the understanding of money can absolutely lead to greater happiness. Now, I say that because on this show, we talk about a lot facts over fear, right? So if you have facts and you understand the way money works and how you can grow it, then you don't have to live in fear of not having it anymore, but you have to understand it. And that's really the unlock to happiness around money. My guest this week is Dr. Hans Boateng, and he's one of the most well-respected investing tutors in the country. Hans was introduced to the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and he was immediately intrigued by the idea that the rich don't work for money. They acquire assets, and the assets make them money. With this knowledge, he has set out to understand and then teach others how to build generational wealth. You guys, this episode is genuinely one of my very favorite episodes so far because I believe with all of my soul that as business owners, if we can understand money and how it works, we would be able to have such a much greater opportunity for both financial freedom and time freedom. I'm telling you, I'm so passionate about this topic, and I love that I was introduced to Dr. Hans just a few months ago. Ira and I have taken several workshops from him and learned so much. Make sure to listen all the way to the end because Hans is going to share his free workshop that he's offering to my listeners. It's a 3-part workshop for beginners to learn how to invest, and I get Hans to spill the tea on the number one stock that he believes all investors should own right now. Are you ready? Let's jump in. Well, hey there, Dr. Hans. Thank you so much for being my guest this week on the She Who Dares podcast. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this discussion, Brandee, and thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of wanted to let our listeners know where I first kind of interacted with you. And that was on Jenna Kutcher's podcast. You were on several months ago, and I was so intrigued immediately by your story. And my husband and I were like, we have to get to know this guy and what he does. And I've just loved learning about who you are and what you teach people about money. And so I thought, oh my gosh, my listeners have to get to know Dr. Hans. So if you'll start out and just kind of tell us a little bit about your background and your story, because your story is super interesting as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Ghana, West Africa. And I like to start the story there because most people think about Africa, and if you were born in the US or if you're listening and you are, let's say, born in Europe, you don't really have a deep understanding of what life would be like. In Ghana, if your parents are educated, more than likely you're going to be in the upper middle class. So I was blessed to have parents who were educated. So we belonged in the upper middle class. What that looks like is, you go into private school, you having a driver that picks you up from school, sends you home. Um, it's interesting. I look at my life right now, and sometimes um, my wife looks at some of my mannerisms with the way that I do things, and she's kind of baffled. And I'm like, yeah, it's because in Ghana, the way that I was raised, like we have most things done for us, but most people don't even know this about Africa. So I shared that kind of background to emphasize the point that my parents realized that education is the key to being able to move up economically.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say education, most people hear that and the default is the acquisition of degrees. Sure, that's been the staple. It's been the conventional way for individuals to acquire knowledge. But nowadays, the internet allows us to be able to acquire knowledge in so many ways. So I'll challenge people listening, right? Don't only think that a degree is the way to acquire knowledge and skills that allow you to stand out. So because my parents were core believers in education, they always used to tell me, hey, Hans, with the way you care about people, you will make a fantastic doctor. So, Hans, you should become a doctor. And I internalized that. So, when I got to the US, I was dropped off in Bronx, New York. I like to say, I like to say before I came to the US, I used to watch American movies, like, movies such as American Pie. Like,
Oh no.
imagine, yep. So this African young man watched, college parties, beaches, everything. And I was dropped off in Bronx, New York. So can you imagine how
No.
that felt, right?
That's
It-
so funny. I love that that is your vision of what America is.
Absolutely an exciting vision as at that.
That is funny. And what brought you to the States when you came here? What brought you here?
So my like I said, my parents value education, and my
Yeah.
dad had acquired his college education in Germany. He actually he was born and raised in a village, but he was one of the top two students in his class, and that allowed him to get a scholarship to study in Germany. So my dad knew the value of education. So they saved money, and when we won the US lottery, which is the green card lottery, which
Okay.
for anyone listening, what that means is in Ghana, people who want to apply for a US green card, there's a lottery system. Millions of people apply. They just kind of roll this bucket, and they pick out about 3 names or 5 names.
No way.
And yes, I'm serious. Like that's what happened. And our family was picked.
Oh my
you know?
gosh, that's amazing.
Yes, and that's how I got a green card. My family got a green card, and I was blessed with the opportunity to be able to come here to pursue my education. So it started out in Bronx, New York. Within the first year, I realized that the environment was not conducive for what I was looking to do with my life. And I don't say this disrespectfully. I say it to mean that the people around me were all focused on how do I make more money, right? Back then, I was earning $6 an hour. Most of my colleagues were earning about the same amount. And to them, if they could find another job that paid $15 an hour or $20 an hour, it felt like success.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I knew that's a limiting belief. It's a limiting mindset. Okay, I'm earning 15 or 20, sure, but like that is not like long-term success.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hyper focused on my education because once again, I wanted to move up economically. So after a year in Bronx, New York, I made the bold decision to transfer to go pursue my Doctor of Pharmacy degree. So I literally at that time, this might be funny to the people listening, but I was in New York. So I only searched for schools in New York. you know,
I
so
mean,
yeah, that's all kind of like I knew I was comfortable with that.
right.
So Buffalo, New York had the best pharmacy school at that time. So I literally just applied to Buffalo, New York for pharmacy, picked up all of my things. I didn't know a single person in Buffalo. Picked up my stuff. My parents, took me to the airport or Greyhound station. I don't remember. So it's either an airport or Greyhound station. And next thing you know, I'm at Buffalo. And that's where I met my wife. That's where I did my degree for Doctor of Pharmacy. And after that, went on, did an MBA, and the rest is history.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So you met your wife and she was an American?
Yes, she's an American. Yes, Tiff.
Nice. And so I know that you post a lot about her, but does she work? Does she work with you? I always like to
Yes,
know everybody's story.
absolutely. Let me tell you an interesting story, which I know you're going to love. When I was young, I was about 10, 11 years, I used to watch these American movies. This time, I'm not referencing American Pie, but
Good. Okay. Okay. That's good. A
yeah,
different movie.
yes, more like Titanic or something of that
Oh,
nature, right?
okay.
And I'd go up to my mom and I was like, Mom, I'll marry an American. And my mom, back then, we didn't have like a green card or a visa or anything. So my mom would listen to me. She literally probably kind of chuckle in her mind. She never, she's like, oh, okay, sure, sure, sure. You marry an American. But think about it, like literally at 10 years or 11 years, I used to say that.
That's
And
so
fast forward to
crazy.
today, yes, I'm happily married to an American.
So fun. And you
So
just had your first baby.
we did Princeton.
Oh,
Just such a blessing.
I
So
love it.
Tiff and I, we met in Buffalo, New York. We're just friends. We would study together. Right before exams, Tiff would say that I'll be the person calling her a day for her notes.
Oh.
you know, just
Yes.
pure friendship. And about 2 years into the friendship, we started kind of hanging out, a little bit more, and then it developed into a deeper relationship. So Tiff is a PA, so physician assistant,
Okay.
and yeah, we live in Virginia. She works. I run my business full time. I've been a full time entrepreneur for the past 2.5 years. That transition by itself is a whole story that we can talk about.
Yes.
Uh, yes, because it was not an easy kind of a leap, right?
Right.
We hear the term take a leap of faith, right? But when you're taking a leap of faith and everyone is scared,
Right.
it takes a lot to take that leap.
It does. And most of our listeners are small business owners. And so I'd love to know a little bit. I know that after school, you became a pharmacist.
Yes, pharmacist. Yes,
Pharmacist. Okay. And so tell us kind of about that and then your journey into being an entrepreneur.
yes. So went to pharmacy school.
Hmm.
Right when I got in, I met this millionaire who became a mentor, and he encouraged me to read this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I
Hmm.
did. The first chapter of the book said the rich don't work for money. So I was like, oh, what does that mean? You know,
Hmm.
I discovered later that it means that rich people focus on working to acquire assets. Okay, so an asset is something that makes you money, right? So I began to look closely at what are the assets that the rich and wealthy have. And I discovered that there are two things: investments, specifically in the stock market, and a business. Okay. So once I discovered that, it shifted my old school beliefs of go to school, get a degree, work as much as you can, and someday, some way, somehow, you have enough money. Right? That was the
Right. Yeah.
yes, that was the
That's the traditional belief, right?
100%. And
Hmm.
now it's like, hey, rich don't work for money, but they work to acquire investments, and they sometimes own or start a business.
Okay.
So then I was like, okay, should I invest or should I start a business? And if you are like me, you like to have the odds in your favor. So I said, I'll do both.
Oh, nice.
Yes,
You're like, why not? Just do both at the same time.
let's do both. Absolutely. So I automatically became an entrepreneur. And I started investing. I started learning about investing. This is one thing that many people don't do right, right? When they want to pursue something, instead of moving towards the acquisition of knowledge and strategies, they don't educate themselves. The key to my success, and many people won't understand why I say success, but down the line, when I'm talking about what I've been able to accomplish, you'd understand. But the key to my success is that I am quick to acquire knowledge. I don't second guess myself. I don't think too much into it. I go make the investment that I need to acquire the knowledge so that it can expedite my success, right? If
Yes.
you're about to pursue or go on a journey, wouldn't it be smart to get guidance from someone who's already walked that path several times?
Yes. I mean, yes.
That's something that I, sort of did. Always prioritizing the acquisition of knowledge. So going back to what we're talking about, got my pharmacy degree, graduated from pharmacy school, and because I had been learning about entrepreneurship and investing, when I got done with pharmacy school, I had this passion to want to learn about business. And back then, 2014, I wasn't exposed to the online industry. So the way that I decided to get knowledge about business was going to business school, right?
Okay.
Obviously, nowadays, depending on a person's goals, they can do things a little bit different.
Hmm.
So I went to business school for 2 years. I was working part-time as a pharmacist. When I graduated from business school, I started working as a consultant in Washington, D.C. After working there for 5 months, they laid off 95% of the staff.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, there was a sequester or sequestration where the
Okay.
government was reducing funds to certain consulting firms and certain projects, and they slashed 95% of the staff. Luckily for me, I had about 3 months worth of a buffer in terms of savings.
Okay.
So I came home and I just kind of paused. And there's another thing: most people never pause. They are always on this cycle. Like, you know, I paused. And during that pause is when I discovered that in the US and around the world, there isn't someone that you can access. And this was back in 2016, after I graduated from the MBA program. There isn't someone you can access to teach you about investing. You can pay a financial advisor to take your money and invest for you, but there isn't an investment tutor or an
Yes.
investing tutor. I
Right.
even Googled investing tutor and no one. I was like, what?
That's crazy.
The United States of America does not have an investing tutor. So how can people learn how to invest?
Right.
And I realized the financial system doesn't want people to learn how to invest. The US financial system wants you to hand your money over to someone else and then pray, cross your fingers, cross your toes that the person does the right thing for you. So then I just felt like there was a calling
Hmm.
for me to step into this void, because during my time in pharmacy school and the MBA program, I started to read a ton of books. I started to read on a daily basis. I would read on average about 20 financial journals, reports, articles. I mean, even today, yesterday, I probably listened to 3 hours worth of financial content. The average person doesn't do that, right? But
No,
I don't know. I know everything going on with the world and the US economy on a day by day basis, and I just love it.
that's amazing.
Most people probably don't care for that. But so with this God-given gift of just being a sponge to soak up or soak in all of this information, when the time came when I realized that there's this gap in the market, I felt like I was uniquely qualified to step in
Hmm.
and be that educator who is not going to be swayed by the money I could make or by anything else other than the fact that I want people to know how money works, how to build wealth. That was my motivation.
Right. And that is when you created the Investing Tutor, right?
Exactly. That's when I created the Investing Tutor. Yes.
That is so amazing. And what I love about this, and just kind of giving an example of our own journey with money, neither Ira, my husband, or myself were really taught about money as children. I grew up with very little. He grew up with a lot, but we neither one really were ever taught about money. And I had an entrepreneurial spirit. So we did create our own business. So that's awesome, but not necessarily in a way that we were thinking about long term wealth. And I think that a lot of small business owners kind of fall into that same bucket where they start a business because they just love doing whatever it is that they do. For instance, for me, being a wedding planner, and because I wanted more freedom of time. But very rarely do we think about that now we don't have a company matched 401k. We don't have retire like any kind of retirement. And so
Mm,
you don't get into being a small business and think about long-term wealth, but at the end of the day we're all going to have to retire someday, right? Or just
absolutely.
building generational wealth. And so I think what you teach is so interesting, especially for entrepreneurs and small businesses who don't think about long-term wealth. It's just not something to think about. You think about how to build your clients and how to get to six figures and then how to get to seven figures. But what are you doing with that money to ensure it's
Absolutely.
there long term?
That's such a phenomenal point. My best friend said, Hans, have you started to focus on small business owners because they might need you the most? That's what my best friend
Mhm.
said about a year and a half ago. Because he said these individuals are so hyper focused on growing their business, they don't realize that time is passing them by.
Yeah.
Each year, they aren't investing,
Yep.
right? Each year, they aren't putting money aside for the future. And I think that as an entrepreneur or as entrepreneurs, we need to begin to prioritize that, right? But
Mhm.
I told my friend that, you know, I'm here to serve, right? I don't want to hyper focus only on small business owners or hyper focus on a retail investor, which means anyone with money that can
Mhm.
invest.
Right.
I'm here to serve anyone who feels like they are at the point where they want to learn more, right?
Mhm.
They can listen to podcasts such as these, or they can reach out, and I'm always here to serve.
Yes, absolutely. So Ira and I took your workshop back in March, and it was actually before COVID hit. I think it was, or at least we signed up before COVID really hit our state.
Yes.
And I think what was, I don't know, it was right then, right when like that week of COVID hit. And we learned so much from your workshop and just kind of retraining our brains. So, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between how kind of like just the average person thinks about money, and then maybe how what you learned through Rich Dad Poor Dad or for through all of your education and how you think about money?
Yes. This is probably going to be the most valuable information. And I don't say it to brag, but I wish someone would have told me this when I was young. First and foremost, money doesn't have emotion. Okay, money doesn't have emotion. as people, we tend to associate certain emotions with money, whether that is fear, right? Of and fear would be I don't like debt, or I don't want to spend money because if I spend money, I'm going to lose it, or whatever that fear is. Okay, so these are the emotions which a lot of people get caught up in: fear or greed.
Mm-hmm.
Greed is I want everything. I want people to see that I'm doing great. I just want that admiration, right? But money is not emotional, it's just money. Another thing that I want you to pay attention to is this: money is just a medium of exchange. What that means is that when individuals want to trade something with one another, it could be your time at work, it could be what you are purchasing from the grocery store. Money allows you to be able to, uh, exchange, right? Or act as a medium of exchange so that you can acquire things, right? Back in the day, if a person wanted corn and I had wheat, we had to measure an amount of corn which trades for an equivalent amount of wheat. Is too complex. Money was created to allow that to happen. So that means that money is serving as the measure of the value that we are exchanging.
Mm-hmm.
So then most people want more money. So then, okay, we know money is a medium of exchange and we know money measures the value of that exchange, right? So then if I, as an individual, want more money, what do I have to do so that more money can move in my direction in exchange for my time, or in exchange for my knowledge, or in exchange for my resources? The only way more money can move towards my direction is if I am more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Once I understood that, I was like, wow. So to make more money, a person needs to become more valuable. What does that mean? They need to acquire more knowledge. They need to acquire more skill. Now you can understand why I listen to financial information on average 2 to 3 hours a day, probably even more. Most people will be like, "What? Why would you do that?" Because I want to become more valuable.
Yes. Yes.
That is why I do that. The acquisition of knowledge and the acquisition of skill increases your value. When you become more valuable, guess what? More money can flow in your direction, because if a person wants to get your information, all of a sudden the value of that information is much higher. So then they have to exchange a higher amount of money for it.
Mm-hmm.
Money is a medium of exchange. It's a measure of value. For you to make more money, you want to become more valuable.
Yes.
So you increase your value, and then this is where a lot of people fall short. If you increase your value, but you don't use that value to serve a lot of people, you are limiting the opportunity to be able to earn more money. Because, and this is very interesting, when I realized this, I was so, like, it completely blew my mind. If you want money, the only way you can get it is from another person. Right?
Mm.
That's the only way you can get money,
I
from
like that.
another
Yeah, because
person.
we can't print it
You
ourselves. I
can't
mean, that's
print it
illegal.
yourself. Yes. So if you want more money, you can only get it from another person. And for people listening, if you're an employee, you get it from your boss.
Right.
If you're a business owner, you get it from your customers and clients.
Yep.
So then if we want more money, we have to be able to serve more people. That is why the richest people in this world are serving the largest amount of people. Look at Amazon, Jeff Bezos. Look at Bill Gates with Microsoft, allowing individuals to be able to have laptops and PCs. Look at Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, 3 billion people on a month-to-month basis using his platform. So your ability to serve more people and consistently increase your value is what is going to bring you the financial success and resources that you want. So that's one of the core things that I had to understand about money. Now, moving forward, now you know how to bring money in. What do you do with the money? The average person, because of the lack of financial literacy, Brandee, will just keep that money in a bank account.
Mm-hmm.
Biggest mistake ever. There's this chart. It shows the cost or the price of different things back in 1937. It said that the cost of a Harvard college education was $30 a year. Okay, the cost of a home back in 1937 was $500 or $800. Right, the cost of a car back then was what, I think about $20 or $25 or something.
So crazy.
Imagine the person back then had $1,600. They had enough money to buy two homes because the average home was $800 back then.
Right.
So if that person saved the 1,600, okay, feeling they have a ton of money back then, what is $1,600 worth today? My response is not much, right?
No,
It
not at all.
it can barely cover 2 months rent, but it could purchase two homes in 1937. That is my simple way of explaining inflation, which is the value of things become more expensive over time. So you cannot just leave money sitting in a bank account. The only time you can leave money in a bank account or a savings account is if that money is your emergency fund.
Okay.
So it's money that you have set aside 6 months of expenses or 1 year of expenses, and it is serving that purpose. That money needs to sit in a bank account forever
Sure.
because it's there to serve a purpose. But every dollar beyond that amount, if it's put into a savings account, I don't mean to be rude, but it's irresponsible because the money has to work for you. You have 1 year's worth of savings. Why are you saving more money?
Right.
So
absolutely.
You now understand how to make money by increasing your value, serving more people. Now you have to put your money to use. And I like to say there are three things that I believe, and it's proven, tested, is the formula for financial success.
Okay,
These
this
three
is the
things.
exciting part because
Yes.
I'm ready. Go for it.
So just as a note, these three things have to be done together. Okay, so they have to be done simultaneously. It's not like you're doing one and moving to the other, you're doing them together. So the first thing that each individual needs to do is they need to be setting aside money for an emergency account. So they need to be saving. Okay, so you earn an income or you earn money, a portion of it goes into a savings account. While doing this, what you're doing is you're building up your reserves to reach the 6-month threshold or the 1 year threshold with regards to your emergency or savings account.
Perfect.
The second thing you want to be doing is you want to be paying down debt.
Okay.
The reason you do this is because as you slowly pay down debt, you are moving towards that goal of being debt-free. Many people are in a rush to be debt-free, and in rushing for that title of I'm debt-free, they forego other important financial things that they have to do. And I'll name the most important one, which is the third thing that you have to do: invest for the future.
Yes.
Building generational wealth. So the three things: when you have that money, you save, pay down debt, and invest. And here's why that's important. When you are saving to be able to take care of the present, anything that might pop up that needs to be handled.
Like
when
COVID.
You are paying, yes, exactly. When you are paying down debt, you're taking care of the past expenses that, you probably didn't have enough financial resources for, and you took out that money to cover, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're taking care of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what you're doing, Brandee, when you are investing? What are you taking care of?
The future.
There you go. So many people are focused on their savings account, they're focused on paying off debt, and they're ignoring their future. And they don't even realize it.
Yeah, because one of the things that I find really interesting is so Ira and I definitely were Dave Ramsey students. And I know that you talk a lot about Dave Ramsey. And so we were big students of his. And I had a lot of debt when we got married and he did not. But so we were hyper focused on being debt free. And we started our business with no debt. It was very important to us to never, ever, ever take on business debt. And as we started learning throughout the years, that has some value, but we were doing it. We could have been really making a lot more money for the future had we been rethinking that a little bit. And even, for instance, once we got rid of all of our debt except for our mortgage, we started paying an extra mortgage payment. We were paying 1.5 times each month our mortgage payment, and not realizing that really, if instead we were taking that additional money and investing it, we would have so much more for the future. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You see, and not to cut you, but if a person truly is rushing to be debt free, they are doing so because of the feeling that they've been told,
Mm-hmm.
right? That having no debt feels good. I know Dave Ramsey because he was part of the financial experts that I studied. I read his books. I listened to his show, right?
Mm-hmm.
But after reading over 400 books and over 40,000 worth of content and learning from the best of the best, you are able to take a step back, look at everything, and then make sense of it.
Mm-hmm.
So Dave Ramsey has his way of making his listeners feel that debt is bad. That's all he's doing. It's not like there's no calculation of what interest am I paying or this and what interest can I get if I invest, or the fact that a matching contribution at your work is providing 100% return, right? So if your
Right.
employer is giving you a matching contribution, meaning you contribute towards your retirement and they are matching it, that means that they are giving you 100% guaranteed return. Why would you want to go pay off a credit card that is charging a 15% interest to forego a guaranteed 100% return with your retirement account? So all of a sudden, it's not even about the numbers, it's about how people feel.
Yes, because that's what everybody tells you is like, you should be debt free. You should be debt free. And I don't think you should go rack up debt, but
Mm-mm.
I love that you teach, if you're doing it at the same time, you can really be building future wealth, right?
Yes. And that's the thing. Brandee, I like to say Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, they all borrowed a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
They are running 500 billion and $1 trillion companies right now. So
Crazy.
why is it that the rich and wealthy are able to borrow money to build more wealth, but the poor and middle class are told to be debt free?
Mm-hmm.
Why? These are some of the questions that I asked myself. And when I began to look closer, I realized that debt is an expense. That's all debt is. It is an expense. What does that mean? It means that every single month, if you have debt, it's an expense, or it's a line item which is being taken out of your income. So that's all that it is. It's an expense. There's no feeling about it. It's the same way your electricity bill is an expense, or your cell phone is an expense. That's what debt is. Most people, when I ask, why don't you like debt? The number one thing that they say is interest, right, Brandee?
Yep, absolutely. That's what I say.
No one complains about the fact that Nike makes a shoe for $5 and sells it for $150. They buy the $150 shoe.
Right.
They don't think about the the percentage increase in that. But then if we look at a credit card and we see 15%, we're like, oh my gosh, 15% interest. What about the iPhone that people have? Apple makes the iPhone for about $350, sells it for $1,200.
Right.
Aren't you paying interest, with that.
That is
So
a brilliant way to think about that. I've never thought about it that way.
because people don't look at the numbers, they just have an emotional visual response to something. We are all paying interest with every single thing that we purchase in our lives because companies have to make a profit.
Right.
We're only just hyper focusing on banks lending out money and charging a 15 or 20% charge. That's why I like to just take a step back, look at the numbers. So when it comes to debt, if individuals listening are following this 3-step strategy, they are saving, paying down debt, which means they will become debt free, and they are investing to build wealth. Someone who is doing this will have millions of dollars, way more than someone who follows a step-by-step process. And here's why. Because every year you wait to begin investing. If you are someone listening and you earn $50,000 a year in income, each year you wait, you lose $240,000 of future income. That money can never be gotten back because time spent is gone. You can't create more time, right? Once you're done paying off your debt, you cannot at that point say, oh, I'm going to go back and go and compound my money. No, you can't. You're older. So time is not in your favor at that point. The time is gone. But so that's someone earning 50K. They are losing 240,000 a year. Someone who earns 100,000 or more, so 6-figure income, they are losing $450,000 a year. Each year they don't invest.
That makes me want to like throw up a little bit.
It made me so concerned to the point that I had to stop and detach. Remember the first thing I said when we started talking about money is I said money doesn't have emotions.
Yes.
So it made me remove completely my emotions around debt or my emotions around having money, the greed factor, right? So the fear and greed, it just detach from all of those things and begin to look at money in a more practical way, right? How think about this. Let's honestly dive deep and think about this. 2 people, one person rushes and pays off their debt in 10 years because they're on a debt-free plan. Another person is building wealth simultaneously while paying down debt. What is the difference between these 2 people when ultimately they are both going to get to age 50 and will be debt-free? The only difference is the person who was investing while paying down debt will be a multimillionaire, and the person who was only paying down debt will have a few hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, you both eventually are debt-free. You are getting to the goal. Right. So then, like, once you look at all of that, it really causes you to really give up the emotional factor and focus on the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it was a huge punch in the gut. And we have a financial advisor who, when we told him we were making extra mortgage payments, he was the one that was like, what? And he showed us this grid and he was like, here's what it'll look like in 20 years when your mortgage is paid off. And if you just keep doing that, and then here's what it'll look like in 30 years if you just keep your 30-year mortgage, but you invest that additional amount. And it was literally a millions of dollar difference. And we were like,
it is.
What? And
it is.
I think for me, I really wanted to share you with our listeners because I wish I could scream from the rooftop to all the 20 somethings. Then I wish someone would have taught me this when I was 20 something, because it would be so different now and how you think about money. It's not about necessarily like teaching you the mechanics. It's retraining your brain on how to think about it. Right.
It really is retraining your brain, right? Most people are told, once again, this isn't a fact, but you are told that debt is bad, right? Dave Ramsey will quote that a borrower is a slave to the lender.
Right.
He often forgets the passage right before that, which says the rich rule over the poor. And based on our discussion, we know that the rich are borrowing money, right? Yes. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, they borrowed money to build their wealth. So if the rich is ruling over the poor,
yes,
And if you don't have money, but we won't dive into that. But we're told consistently, hey, if you owe money, you're a slave to the person who is lending you that money. And I sat down with that statement for about 2 minutes, and I quickly had a response to it.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, a borrower is a slave to the lender. What if the borrower, okay, after they've taken that money that they borrowed, turn around and they become a lender with that money that they've borrowed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they are earning a profit enough to pay the lender. So
100%.
all of a sudden, the borrower is no longer a slave because they are also lending the money, which goes back to the fact that what you do with debt determines whether it is being used advantageously or if it's being used negatively. Are you using it to build and grow your business? Like if you had done that, Brandee, you and Ira, you might have a much larger business right now,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or are you using it just to buy things? Remember, we talked about greed so that people can see that you're doing well. But
Right.
maybe you are just overspending to acquire things to feel good, and those things are not producing or generating an income. That is the negative use of debt.
Yes, 100%. And since so many of our listeners are business owners, this was something that we were super passionate about, is taking no business debt. It was something we almost wore as like a badge of honor for many years. We were like, oh, we built our business completely on no debt. However, our accountant a couple of years ago really helped us to rethink that and say, you have to take on some debt to be able to grow exponentially. It's part of doing business. And she also was helping us to see some of the people that you've talked about. And it's like, as long as you take that debt on for growth and you have a plan and you use it to exponentially grow your business, it's not bad debt. Debt can be a great thing. And I think that a lot of business owners are afraid of that because it's like, oh, but no, we shouldn't take on debt. How do you think some of the biggest firms in the world are built? It's because they take on debt.
Yes, I like to say debt is fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone can say, hey, Hans, I can walk from Virginia to New York. Sure, you can walk, but guess what? I'm going to get a car. I'm going to put fuel in the car and I'm just going to drive.
That's right. And you get there a
That's
lot faster.
You get there a lot faster. You're both heading in the right direction. One person is going to really be struggling, but they are struggling feeling like they are doing the right thing. One last thing that I wanted to bring up when it comes to this whole concept of being debt free. There's nothing wrong with being debt free. I believe it's the long-term goal. It's not something a person needs to rush and have. It's not that you cannot pass on being debt free to the next generation. Your kids cannot inherit that. I like to say, when you're debt free and you reach retirement, being debt free is not going to fund your retirement.
So
People
true.
need to shift their mindset. What does being debt free mean? It means you don't have an expense. It doesn't mean you generate an income. So we need to focus on how are we making the right decisions today
Yes.
to build an asset, to generate an income for the future, whether it's via your business and investing, while paying down debt so that you are and we are all eventually debt free. And I just want to add on one thing. In 2009, Apple had $200 billion worth of cash on hand. $200 billion. And they wanted to pay dividends to investors, which means they wanted to pay out cash to investors. They did not go and tap into their cash reserves. They went out and borrowed money by issuing a bond. Why would a company with $200 billion worth of cash go out and borrow money? Because they know that they are better served investing their cash back in themselves, or they are better served taking that borrowed money and investing in themselves instead of limiting themselves by depleting their cash
Yes.
because they don't want to have debt. So it all is determined by how you use the debt. Debt by itself is just an expense.
I love that. That is so helpful. I definitely want to just give our listeners a toe dip into the investing piece of what you do. You provide so much education, free and paid, on your website for investing and like new investors and learning. But could you tell us, like, Ira and I took your workshop and we are now using Cash App, which is so fun. And I know you love Robinhood as well, but can you tell us just a very like 10,000 level view of just how to beginner invest?
Yeah, first thing I want you to know is this concept of compound interest. Remember when we started this podcast, we discussed the concept that the rich don't work for money.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you don't have to work for money, one of the easiest ways is by investing in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
Many people hear stock market and they get scared. They say, "Hey, oh my gosh, the market can crash. I can lose all of my money." But when you look at the data, the stock market for the past 100 years has never lost money on average. In actuality, the stock market has been averaging a 10% return for the past 100 years,
That's
which means that
insane.
if you have money in the stock market, your money is doubling every 7 years versus a savings account at 0.05%. Your money is doubling every 144 years.
Oh my gosh, that is insane.
It is. So investing is very important. For me, the day that I learned about investing and I learned about this 10% number for the past 100 years, and I said to myself, okay, let me look at what a minimum wage worker would be able to do with their money if they were investing. So you look at a minimum wage earner, they are making about 1,000 or 1,200 a month. So if this person is able to invest 10% of that amount, so let's say, about $100 a month. And I asked the question, can a minimum wage worker invest 10% of their money if they wanted to? Just
Yes.
10%? The answer is yes, absolutely, they can. And I plugged that into a calculator. So once again, I'm taking out emotions. I'm just looking, 10% is the average return on the market. We take a minimum wage worker investing $100 a month from age 20 till age 65. Plugged it in and it said $1.1 million. And I just stood up from my seat the day that I plugged that into the calculator. I was like, what? You mean to tell me a minimum wage worker investing $100 a month from age 20 to age 65, so just 45 years, $100 would have over $1 million? Why don't they tell us this?
Right.
Why? Anyone can become a millionaire.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. This is not hype. It's just numbers, facts, no emotions. Once I understood that, and the fact that that $100, that minimum wage worker didn't need to show up anywhere. They didn't need to clock in. They didn't need to do anything but consistently invest that money to become a multimillionaire. Once I understood that, I wanted every single person on this planet or anyone who would listen to begin investing. So when it comes to investing, I believe there are three investments that everyone needs to have. The first is take advantage of your employer's retirement account. Okay, that's the first. Second, investment funds. So that's where we're talking about index funds, exchange traded funds. And the third is stocks. With stocks, we're looking at individual companies. Okay, so these are the three investments that everyone needs to have. If you're listening to this, perhaps you're like, oh my gosh, where do I go for this? How do I know this? How do I know this? I'll share with you the free program that I've put together. But I would say start with a retirement account through an employer. If you're a business owner and you're moving to the next type of investment, which is investment fund, or if you are an individual investor and you're moving to investment funds, at that point, I would say look at your index funds. So an index fund is a basket of investments that track the economy right? So in the US, there's a fund that tracks the economy. So if you are buying this index, it means you are buying all of the best companies in the US. To me, that's a no-brainer. Imagine buying a fund which has Apple, Google, Microsoft, um, Netflix, Facebook, Lowe's, Home Depot, Disney. I can go on, right? IBM, and this index tracks the best companies for the rest of your life without you needing to do anything.
Okay.
It automatically adds the best companies every single year and takes out the poor performing companies every single year. That is a brilliant investment vehicle, and that's what an index does.
Okay.
So that, I think, is, and it's an extremely low fee, right? What I mean by that is an index costs less than a mutual fund. Most people just know about mutual funds, and they are sold mutual funds. But an index costs 50 times less than a mutual fund. What that means is that someone who has a mutual fund is going to lose 50% or more of their money to fees, and someone who has an index fund is not going to lose that 50%. It's a huge deal. Yes.
That is a huge deal.
It is a significant deal, because I'm going to be honest and say that most people probably listening to this have been placed in a mutual fund. So then you will need to have that discussion with if it's an advisor that you have. Hey, why am I in a mutual fund and not an index? And it's typically because their company provides that fund, and that's the way that they get paid, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't know how to invest, at least you have $500,000 instead of having nothing at all. But for me, I want to keep 99% or 98% of that million, or 10 million, or 50 million, or whatever it is. Yeah.
That's amazing. Tell us just your one top stock. If you were only able to invest in one stock right now, what would it be?
Very, very good question. So if I was to invest in one stock, and by the way, I know we didn't talk about like a brokerage account, which is the app or the platform by which a person can begin investing. I believe Cash App, like you've mentioned, Cash App is phenomenal. Another app is Robinhood, which can be considered as well. If I could pick one stock, it's a very good question. Let me think about it. Well, let me let you know what I'm thinking. I'm picking between Apple and Amazon.
Oh, okay.
So Apple and Amazon, if I could go with one stock.
Well, let me tell our listeners why you're thinking. One of the best tips that you have given to us, in addition to just kind of helping us retrain our brains, but is to invest only in companies that you love. And because you have to think about it as that you're purchasing a piece of that company. And that was huge for us, because a lot of times you see the shiny object over there, but you know nothing about the company. And so it's also more fun to invest when you love the company that you're invested in. You really want them to do well. You buy from them, you support them. So I think that is a really great tip for our listeners too.
Absolutely. So yeah, if I could pick, or if I should pick between Apple and Amazon, I'm going to have to go with Amazon. Okay. And here's why. Apple is a phenomenal company, right? But they are still selling a brand, which is like a phone or laptops or whatever. They are selling a brand. Amazon is not selling a brand. Amazon sells everything. If you look at the Amazon logo, you see that there's an arrow that goes from A to the Z. So Jeff Bezos said he wants Amazon to sell everything. That was his goal when he started the business. So sell everything. So to me, I look at those two. Okay, Apple is a phenomenal investment. I own Apple stock. Amazon is a phenomenal investment. I own Amazon stock. And what I mean by I own is our family owns this. But if I could pick between the two, I'd certainly pick Amazon. They are diversified across so many industries. They have cloud computing. They have, grocery stores. They have a pharmacy business. They have a movie business. They have a music business. They have artificial intelligence in their home, which most people be like, what is that? It is your Alexa device in your home. They have the potential to expand into drones. They have a logistics company to deliver, to fly, products and services across the US. And they've done all of that primarily in the US. As they begin to grow across the world, they go to India, which they just opened up in India several months or a year ago. As they move to Africa, as they consistently grow and look at different industries, right? So that is why. And don't get me wrong, Apple can do all of that. It's just that, once again, Apple is a brand with certain products. Amazon has everything.
So cool. And because I made you only pick one too. So you had to put one in front of the other.
Absolutely.
So Hans, can you tell us where our listeners can find you and where they can learn more about what you teach?
Yeah, first and foremost, I just want to thank you, Brandee, for having me, and also to thank you, the listener. Your time is incredibly valuable, and for you to have listened to this entire podcast to learn, it just shows that you are here for a reason, and it's my honor and privilege to have been able to share that with you. In terms of connecting with me, if you're on social media, Facebook or Instagram, just search Investing Tutor, right? And you'd be able to find me there. If you are on LinkedIn, you can just search my name, Hans Boateng, and I'm sure the spelling will be here on the podcast. And if you are interested in watching that free lesson that I put together, and I want to caveat by saying this: up until the point where the George Floyd incident happened, most of my programs have been behind a paywall, right? I used to say, hey, if people want information, they have to pay, because if you pay, you're just more attentive, you take it serious, you learn, and you act, you implement. And so I've always had that mindset. Sure, with my social media channel, I give lots of information away for free, but if people wanted to really dive deep, most of my best content was behind a paywall. Just like, you, Brandee, and Ira, when you got that workshop, right? Look at how huge of a shift that had in your lives. But after the George Floyd incident, and after looking at, I took a step back and I was like, Hans, there is police brutality, but underneath that is truly what people are frustrated with, and it is the lack of economic opportunities, the lack of financial resources. People are tired of not having enough financial resources. And that's what then lends itself into all of these other things. When you don't have financial resources to be able to lobby in government, or to be able to get yourself in certain neighborhoods, or take your kids to certain types of schools, when you don't have financial resources, you are limited significantly. So once that was placed on my heart, I was like, hey, Hans, what have you done to minimize this? What have you done? And I realized immediately that I had to put together a free resource, right? Free program. So I literally recorded this program just like how I record any of my paid sessions or programs. And many of my clients will know, because I didn't, leave out things. I poured my heart out and taught in these 3 free lessons. Each lesson is about 30 minutes each. So if you're interested in at least beginning that journey to understanding how money works, so that you can begin to build wealth, build a legacy, right? Make sure that you're laying a foundation for your kids and the next generation, you can go to my website. It is pleasehelpmeinvest.com. So the website again is pleasehelpmeinvest.com.
Yeah. And you guys, I am telling you, I've taken one of Hans's paid courses and now I'm listening to these three. I've actually already listened to all three parts of the free workshop. It is so good. And when he says he holds nothing back, that's so true. There's so much information. I literally pause, go see what he's talking about. He teaches you how to understand if a stock is a good one to purchase and just so many other things. And so I would highly encourage you to go to pleasehelpmeinvest.com and listen to the 3-part educational series on money mindset and investing and generational wealth. It is so helpful. So, Hans, thank you so much for coming on here. I feel like people really got some serious nuggets out of this. And you guys, if you're interested in learning more about working with Hans through his paid workshops or through his one-on-one tutoring, that's on his website as well. And Hans, thanks for coming.
Brandee, thank you so much again. This was an absolute delight.
Okay, so who is running out to buy Amazon stock right now? I know Ira and I have definitely been looking at it. And because we've done some workshops with Hans, we actually have a few other stock tips from him that we have been investing in. And it's so much fun. We use the Cash app. That's the way that we have been investing. And it's really a lot of fun each day to just kind of peek at it and see what it's doing. And we've had some super crazy highs and some super crazy lows during this COVID season. But it's just been a really fun thing to do together and to learn more about money and how we can invest and make our money work for us instead of just sitting in a savings account. I hope that you loved this episode as much as I did, and I would really invite you to go find Dr. Hans on social media. He mentioned his social media links in the episode. We'll also have them in the show notes, so you can just click to follow him. He shares so many great stock tips and strategy for investing and just overall tips about money on his social media. So definitely he's one to follow and learn from. I know that you will love it. You guys, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I would love it so much. You know I appreciate every single time one of you makes a review. So if you pop over to Apple Podcasts and you leave a 5-star review, we always appreciate those. And share it on your social media. Tag myself so that I can say thank you. And you're welcome to tag Dr. Hans as well. And you guys, thank you so much for coming back for another episode. And we'll see you next week.